we'll name it on the pod, episode 9, with just me and Jake this time, but also Trevor Giancola. Trevor is a guitar player from the Greater Toronto area. He is currently teaching at Humber College, but he's also a jobbing musician, and he also records and writes his own music. His latest release came out in the fall, right? Was that when it came out? Yeah,
it did.
Yeah, Sonnet 18, featuring Adam Aruda and Rick Rosado. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Seamus Blake. So that was a cool thing. We'll talk more about that after. Man, it's really cool to get you on because Jake and I, our memory of you is probably goes further back than your memory of us, which I think is a funny thing. So the first time Jake and I knew of you was when you came to our high school. Amy Peck was our teacher.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And she did this a few times, even before we got there. She would regularly get jazz musicians to come in and do clinics and do guest stuff. So
we got a lot of great people come in.
It's actually crazy. Don Thompson was at our high school.
That was before us, though.
Before us, yeah.
John Maharaj came in and did something at one point.
Ted Clinton and Kirk McDonald came in at the same time.
Yeah.
For a concert.
Amazing.
Stuff like that.
We got Larnell
Lewis
Will
and
Karn.
Will Karn came. Neil Davis was there a lot. But then there's one particular time, it was you and Nick Morgan and
Dan Fortin.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and that was a cool thing because that was some of my earliest exposure to jazz being played on guitar, and that was a cool thing. And I remember bringing my custom 24 PRS and being I gotta bring my coolest guitar.
Okay.
I gotta look serious.
But make an impression.
Yeah, I really had no idea what I was doing. And then
wow.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I remember that vivid. I mean, I don't remember the clinic very well, but I remember we went for sushi right after in Whitby, and I was showing Dan Fortin this guitar I wanted to buy. It was a 1950 Gibson L7 cutaway with a McCarty pickup.
Dope. Well, just on your phone, or did you go and show him the guitar?
I had taken a couple photos of it on my phone, and I was showing him those.
Cool.
But I also remember there was a guy who played trumpet at that clinic, and he got up and played with the band. And I thought that this kid has so much charisma and so much confidence. And
Mark.
Yeah, it was Mark. I know exactly who that is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, I wish I had the showmanship and confidence that this, in my whole life, I will never possess what this kid possesses. That was my takeaway from that clinic.
Wow, that's super interesting because he fixes smoke alarms for a living now.
Probably a good idea.
He does it charismatically though, and
yeah,
loudly,
yeah,
confidently.
Yeah, scares people into making sure they check their batteries.
Yep.
Yeah. That's wild.
He's gonna save lives someday.
Yeah.
But I remember that was a weird. I always felt like I was super weird to the musicians that came in. I just asked them
You're weird to every musician.
I'm weird to everybody all the time. But I remember back then specifically, I had all the music that I liked, and I'd go up and be like, you know this band, and they'd be like, yeah, I guess, I don't know. It's that's kind of my first instinct to be like, oh, this band's kind of like jazz fusion. Do you know them? And just bombard them with questions about.
They're called Snarky Puppy.
Yeah, shit like that.
Never heard of them.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I was probably super awkward. I know I asked Dan a bunch of questions that he was just kind of what who is this?
You wrote down a list of jazz guitar players for me to check out because I remember asking because I really had no concept at that point in time, and I was like, how do I make my soloing sound jazz? And you were like, well, how do you make your rock playing sound like rock? What do you listen to? And I was like, Led Zeppelin and stuff. And you're like, all right. And you wrote down all these jazz guitar players, and you're like, listen to these. And I lost that list. I have no idea what you wrote down on it, but I thought about that for years afterwards, and just
right.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, that's always a thing I come back to as when I'm teaching music, because a lot of people they're trying to play jazz and they've already learned a different style. So it's like, well, how did you learn that one? Well, do the same thing with this one. That's a lot of, whatever.
It seems like it should be obvious.
Yeah, but it wasn't for me when I started. Let's put it that way. Or it kind of. I guess it kind of was, but I got away from it at a certain point. I guess I got convinced that there's a book that I didn't understand. I would just be like, well, I'm obviously stupid, and this book is amazing, so I suck and I'll never get it. Like I didn't just get that maybe somebody made a book to make some money and it sucked.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I have is, so how did you start playing guitar, and what kind of influenced you to choose that instrument specifically?
Right. I mean, it's a hard question to answer because I didn't sort of think, well, there's all my instruments. That one looks pretty sexy.
Yeah.
I think it was more like, yeah, I thought the guitar was really cool. And I started listening to a bunch of new music. Like, I guess, so I got to get my dates right here. Okay. So around 1993, we're in 1992, 3, like, if I was like 8, 9 years old, it was like the music on the radio was Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots, Smashing Pumpkins, Rage Against the Machine, Alice in Chains. That was sort of what was on the radio that I was listening to and liking. And at the same time as that was going on, I was getting a healthy dose of a bunch of really good music that my parents listened to when they were that age. So my parents were born in 1955. So in the late 60s, mid to late 60s, they were listening to the Beatles and Bob Dylan and Led Zeppelin and, Pink Floyd and the Doors and Jimi Hendrix. So I was sort of listening to all of that stuff. I don't know exactly when I listened to what, but that was sort of what I was getting into. And I was really digging the guitar. I really wanted one, I guess. I just thought it was really cool. Like when I thought it was the coolest thing. And I just thought it was cool that it was, and I remember thinking this, like to the average person, you pick this thing up and you can't do anything with it. It doesn't make sense. You can't play, and like it's a useless thing. It's not, but then it's like everyone could climb a ladder, but this thing, no, you have to. And then depending on who you give it to, it's like they all did something different with it, and it was all blowing my mind. And so I found a guitar in my grandmother's basement, which belonged to my aunt. And I took it home, and it was funny. It was a funny story. So it was tuned weird. It was tuned wrong. It had been out of tune for like 30 years. So I took it home and I wrote this song just with the open strings. And I still remember the pattern, like, but then when I brought it to my friend's dad, he was like, "Oh, this is tuned wrong. Like, I got to tune this for you." And he tuned it up, and then I lost my song because then now it sounded like this. Yeah, and I went home and I actually cried. I was like, because I knew I'd never be able to find it. And anyway, like now, if I play the same song, it's not a very good song. I only remember the new way. Like I can't remember what it originally sounded like. And I remember thinking, wow, the original way was so much better.
Yeah.
That's tragic.
So that's sort of the beginning of it.
Yeah, cool.
Nice.
Cool. So that's sort of your thing with guitar. You went to music school, so you went to Humber, right? That's where you got your. Mm-hmm. That's where you got your piece of paper.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah. What do you mean eventually? Did it take you a long time?
It depends on if you consider 10 years a long time or not.
Oh.
Well, no, I mean, I did. I guess I sort of had I don't know. I mean, I was been a very self-motivated learner. And so for me, I saw music school as a supplement to this path I was on. And so I always just thought, well, I'm going to take a year off and practice. Like I know what I need to work on. I guess I have this memory that almost every year I just thought I wasn't going to come back. But then all my friends are going back, and I probably won't be as motivated if I'm just at home all day. And so ultimately and then in third year, I was like, this is for sure going to be my last year. So I didn't take any electives, and I did all music courses and took 2 private lessons. And then of course I came back for fourth year, but
It sucked
in the old
coming back?
days,
Like, having to
it
do all those
didn't suck.
electives?
Yeah, it was a drag that I had to. I don't remember how I felt. I could pretend I do, but yeah, I think it sucked. Yeah, sure. I wanted to have a private lesson and do more fun stuff, but I don't remember exactly what it was. But it was probably at least half electives. But like back in the day, I don't know if you know this. So there used to be Humber didn't have its own degree program. So there's sort of three eras of Humber. There's old Humber that I wasn't a part of, where it was just a diploma program. So it's 3 years long, and you got a diploma, college diploma. Now my era it's that you still have the exact same 3-year diploma program, but you add a fourth year at Humber with university level classes, and then you take 2 university courses from Thompson River University, TRU, which is a university in BC. So you had to do the extra year at Humber and then do these 2 online courses. And then you would get your degree. So it would be like graduated from Humber, Bachelor of Fine Arts in Music, TRU via Humber College or whatever. And then ultimately, not long, maybe 10 years after that, they got their own degree, which is what's happening now.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't even know that. Yeah, that's pretty wild. I had no idea. It's still pretty crazy that it's a university program offered in a college. I haven't really heard of anything like that at any other college. I mean, I could just not be asking around enough, but
yeah, and I think because the program is so great, and because so many great people have, people come from all over the world to go to Humber. So I think it holds weight that way. Like if it was just some new program that didn't have a history and they were trying to make it a degree, then even if they got it, I don't know if people would validate it. But the idea that it is what it is, I think helps. Oh yeah, so that's what I missed. So anyway, I did the 4 years, but I did the extra 2 courses like in 2011.
Oh,
and I just finished it to I wasn't even, I've always been a little bit anti-paper, I was always like, well, why bother getting the paper? Like, I don't need a piece of paper to prove that I'm worthy. Like and I still sort of feel like that on and off, but certainly back then, big time. Like there was a lot less people that had their pieces of paper back then.
Yeah.
Whereas now so many great people do. Back then it was almost like anyone who was anyone didn't have a piece of paper. It was kind of like that was the vibe.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, I don't even know why I finished it or if I should have, but I finished it. I did finite and calculus.
It's really cool that you had the freedom to be able to decide that on your own as well. I feel like a lot of musicians our age, especially the ones that are in programs now, are almost only there because they're, being forced by parents or whoever to get the piece of paper. And I think that's kind of not the best way of going about it. Like we've even talked to a couple people in this podcast that had to drop out halfway through, and it was like a really tough decision for to talk to their parents about. And it's really, it almost like it doesn't fit into their musical journey almost to have to get the program done. So I feel like that doesn't help the journey of a musician almost.
Yeah, it's what happens, I think, when you try to objectify an art form.
Yeah.
And institutionalize it. There's going to be weird things that happen like this.
Mm-hmm.
Because then there's the people who, if you turn music into an institution, there's people who don't understand art and music are going to look at it and treat music like an institution, like my parents, who are like, you have to go back this year and get your degree. And it's like, that's...
Yeah. I mean, there's so many times where I felt like I needed to take a year off or do whatever just to find myself as like an individual and as a musician. And I didn't get that opportunity to do it. And now I'm doing it now when I'm 23 and I just finished my 4 years at U of T, and I'm like, oh, I have a lot of catching up to do with what I actually really want to do.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's probably not atypical for people of any program. I mean, it's funny, it's like the times they are a-changing, but sometimes they're changing more than other times. And it seems to me like they're changing a lot now. And they've changed a lot since I was your age, you know, or going to school or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I think just in general, like I've definitely had the thought over the last 5 or 10 years of, you know, there's all these programs. It's kind of like the war machine. You know, if you have a war, then everyone gets a job because they've got to make all this shit. But, you know, so the education machine, it's like to run a school that you get funding from the government and everyone gets a job and the kids get educated. But, you know, when there's no jobs for the students that are coming out, like there's a lot of programs that, you know, there's an epidemic in the States. I've read about it in, I don't know, everywhere, Wall Street Journal, and just of people graduating and then having a few $100,000 worth of debt because that's what it costs down there, and, you know, living in their parents' basement and having, you know, you have all this debt and you're like, all right, what should I do with my life? It's like, you know.
Yeah.
Or I remember Ari Honig came up and did a clinic at Humber a few times over the years, but one of the things he said, somebody said, well, what advice would you give a young musician? And this is certainly coming from the American pricing of school information, but he was just like, get into as little debt as you can while you're in school, which is great advice. And I also thought it was really interesting that he went right there, because that, although that's an issue here in Canada, down there it's a really big issue. You know, on top of having to find yourself and figure out how to make money, and you also have this enormous debt, which it's debilitating, you know. So, I mean, I also think, like, even the idea of getting a degree or not, I still don't know what I think about it. Like, a few years ago, I started my master's degree for the wrong reasons. Like, I did it because I thought I wanted to get a full-time gig at Humber eventually, and I guess I might as well do this. And ultimately, all it really did was take away from the time with my family and time that I would have spent doing other musical things. And then I didn't even finish, and I don't want to finish. I don't think I'm going to finish. So, but I have there's a lot of people I really respect, a lot of my close colleagues who have done that and are doing it now, or even starting it. And, you know, good for them. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. That's a tough situation.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, my view on it has definitely shifted. I loved the 3 years I've been at Humber so far. It's been a great experience. I've gotten everything I want to get out of it. But now it's like I'm staring down the barrel of my 4th year. I realize that my 4th year is not going to be what I expected it was going to be. I am going to go back in September, but now all my classes are online. I won't get to play with people in improv class. I won't be able to play in an ensemble. Like, I don't have the chance to play in A or B band, you know, stuff like that.
Of course.
I won't, you know, lots of, you know, because of the pandemic, lots of people have moved out of the country, or at least far away. So, like, I'm pretty sure, you know, like, through people who are in the States that I might want to play with, or people in BC I might want to play with on my 4th year recording project, but I'm doing it anyways, just kind of get it over with, and I'm kind of just moving on. So it's weird.
I mean, yeah, those are all good points. I mean, the first thing that I would think about is, it's sort of, well, what is available, you know? Like, it's so, like, one of the first things I did when the pandemic started was I got a home studio recording setup, you know? So that's something you can do, and that's something I'm doing. And it's not going to replace the other things, but it's something, you know, so you can still record with those people. And I mean, for, you know, I bought some monitors, phone, cables, some software. I bought this software called Studio One, which is really great. It's really intuitive and easy to learn. And a little Scarlett 2i2, whatever.
Exactly what I
we
got.
both got one of those.
I think everything was, it's just like under $1,500, and man, for a little, it sounds really good. Like, I mean, it took a few days to get sounds, but so I would sort of, I mean, if I were you, and I'm a musician trying to make music and exploring my options. So it's kind of funny, like, before the pandemic, it was like, okay, I play gigs and I write music and I teach. And now it's like, I write music and I teach and I record my music at home. I make these demos, you know, and so the recording stuff at home has sort of carved out a little creative vehicle path for me where I don't have, it's like before it was like, if I didn't have a gig for a couple of weeks, I'd be like, fuck man, I want to play with some people, like sucks, you know, I'm just practicing. But it's like, well, now I have this. I could spend like 5 hours one day doing that and blending it, and I'm going to record that part on acoustic, and I'm going to put some delay on that, you know, and you finally come up with something, and it's a creative endeavor. So it's sort of, I thought I'd be a lot more freaked out about not playing gigs now. Or I thought I'd be more pissed off about it.
Yeah.
But it's just all about, oh, I can't do that. Okay, well, what can I do?
Yeah, people are finding a way for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we talked to lots of people that are like doing their own thing. Like we talked to Rachel and Justice, Rachel Bob and Justice Durr last week. And Justice is like, yeah, I'm learning how to sing now. Like I'm figuring out, you know, some techniques.
Amazing.
And, you know, how I like to do it. And he's like, this is something I've never done before, but now I have the time to do it. So yeah.
Yeah. At the beginning of the pandemic, like I was like, holy shit, I got 3 weeks off or whatever, 2 or 3 weeks, whatever they thought it was going to be. It was like, holy shit, I'm going to practice all day for 3 weeks. And I was doing it, and I was just like, holy shit, I haven't practiced like this since before I had kids. Like, you know, and I was like, I probably won't ever get to do this again, really. So, yeah. I mean, and I think the school's doing that too. The school's very much being like, well, what can we do? Like, what are we able to provide? And like, I was part of a bunch of meetings where, you know, it's just such a tremendous amount of time and energy from like, especially the full-timers that they're putting into, you know, continuing to make the program as great as it can be, you know? So it's, and yeah, you know, maybe we have a vaccine in a week and everything's back to normal, and maybe we never get one, you know, like nobody knows what's up.
Yeah.
It's a tough situation. It really is. So I wanted to ask some of your influences, sort of two-part, like both your playing and your compositions, because I'm actually a huge fan of both of your records. They're your trio record and the newer one.
Oh, thanks.
18. And I just wanted to know kind of stylistically where you draw a lot of your compositional influence.
And improvisation.
Okay.
That word.
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, I can either maybe handle them sort of one at a time or more together. I mean,
so I do realize that it's a big question.
Yeah.
Big question to ask.
Yeah. It's a hard question. Like, for example, like, I guess I would consider myself a very organized, analytical type of person. And certainly when it comes to practicing and trying to understand music. So I sort of see a divide between studying music, which is a fancy way of saying, you know, just zoning the fuck in on something. And then creating music. And I really do think it's important to separate those two, at least for me and my brain and my personality. So I guess what I'm getting at is if I'm studying something, then it'll be very analytical and everything will be thought out and et cetera, et cetera. And, but if I'm composing or improvising, I literally like to do the complete opposite. So I like to try to draw from my subconscious and I'll try to make this as brief as I can. So I believe that music is feelings put to sound. That's what I believe. So in order to capture a feeling, step one is you need to have a feeling. And for me, the way that my brain frames that is usually with sound. So a lot of times when I write a song, I'll have just woken up from a dream, and I'll be really fixated on something, and you know, it's just like anybody else says that's a composer. It's just, it's almost like the song is there and you're just trying to find it on the guitar. And I've gotten a lot better at finding it because now I know a lot more chords. And so the problem I had for a long time was I'd have a sound in my head and I'd go to find it on the guitar so I could figure out what it is and then write it down. But I'd guess the wrong thing. I'd be like, oh, maybe it's this. And I'd, oh no, that's not it. And then now that new sound would replace the old sound. Like now I couldn't remember what it is I was hearing before. So what I do now is I like record myself as I'm composing just on my phone.
Yeah.
And so then like I've had time, there's actually a song on my first record that I couldn't remember this one chord. I'm like, fuck. And I eventually I just had to like pick a chord that I knew was wrong and write it in the chart, and we recorded it that way. And like a year later, I found on an old phone, like the original voice memo of like the first day of writing that song. And I found it. I'm like, oh, it's that. Like, fuck, you know, and it was really satisfying. But so, yeah. And now it's better. Like I can sort of, I can't quite do it without the guitar. Like I need a guitar, a piano still. But so in other words, I just sort of have this thing. It's just this thing that's there that I'm kind of trying to capture.
Yeah.
You know, so, and I can go back after the fact and sort of analyze it and see why it's working and not working. But in the moment, it's just, you know, it probably has as much to do with the people I meet and talk to and experiences I've had in nature and movies I've seen, interviews I've seen with Marlon Brando or Meryl Streep or, you know, my favorite actors and stuff. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's just, who knows? It's such a, it's so intertwined for me to it's like every composition I write, or most of them, it's sort of like, this is my definition of what it's like to be alive. This is what it might not make any sense to anybody else, but for me, if I listen to the song, it's like, right. That's how I was feeling. It's kind of like that.
That's a really interesting way of going about it. I find a lot of the time when I'm, you know, if I'm in a rut for writing or something like that, I'm almost like waiting to find something musical that influences me like directly. Like I'm like trying to find a new album or something like that. But I've never really tried to take too much influence from outside of music. So I think that's a really interesting way of going about writing, and something that I'm definitely going to try now, because I know I get the whole thing like you wake up and you're inspired by a dream or something like that, and I think that's a really good way to go about writing. I don't know if you do that.
Yeah, the last, like, it probably easy to say the last 10 songs I wrote were probably all conceptual, that had nothing that started from an idea that wasn't musical, like rhythmic or melodic or harmonic or anything. It came from like, this is what I'm going to write a song about, if it has lyrics or not, you know. Like even like I talked about this on Pool Boys, our other podcast. I wrote a song about a girl that I saw at Costco. And it started off with like an idea for lyrics, and it turned into this metaphor, but then it turned into like the way that I played the guitar, because of the way that, so that's something that I've been doing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess I do that, but I'm kind of like matching, like if I write something and just kind of comes out of whatever, just mess around on the guitar or the piano or whatever, I find an influence outside of it to attach to it, and then that becomes what it is, because it'll give a mood or something.
But if it's funny too, because if you sort of look at historically, like it's hard to know exactly, but it just seems like if you look at the periods and were the craziest, that's usually when the music got really vast, you know, like the late 60s. Like think about what was going on socially. I mean, Martin Luther King and all of that was starting for the first time really in America, and the women's rights thing and environmental stuff about, you know, taking care of the planet, and you know, everyone's getting killed, like, you know, the Kennedys and Malcolm X, like, you know, they're killing everybody. Like, so it's like times were so crazy. And look at all the music. Like if you look at just what was going on in popular music was outstanding. It was happening so fast and changing. But even in the jazz world, I mean, if you look at the difference between the early 60s and basically the Blue Note era still going strong, and the late 60s where, jazz just kind of ended. I mean, how could you not mix it with everything else? And all the big names were doing it. And, you know, if you think about Miles Davis, even from like 1967 to 1970, just the transformation of what happened month to month in those years. I think it's a reflection of the times more than anything, I think.
Before we talk about that, I just have a more specific question about how you improvise. I'm curious if,
Right.
and I'm talking about like in a jazz, whatever that means, sort of
Playing a
scenario.
standard?
Playing a standard, yeah. Playing a standard at the Rex. When you're improvising, what, if any, influences are you taking from that's not jazz music? Blue note jazz music. You know what I mean? Like
Kind of,
like
yeah.
other like types of music. Like
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's another good question. I mean, and it's hard. I'll do my best to answer it. I don't really know exactly what's going on. I know that if I'm playing a classical piece and trying to do it perfectly, or if I'm improvising at the Rex on a difficult song, if I look at the TV at the Rex on the side there, you can kind of stare at the TV. They play like Cable Pulse 24 usually, or the Blue Jay game or something. Then I find that I can just relax and play some good shit. You know, it's like, so I like the idea of not taking yourself more seriously than you have to. It's like, I do this all fucking day, you know, like it's been almost 30 years of me like putting every ounce of every second into studying and playing. Like, so it doesn't matter how much I concentrate harder, you know, come on, you know, it's like, it's going to come out. Like it's 99% of it is just going to be everything else that's happened. So I think just relaxing and being in the moment, but it's not that different from composing, where it's like there's this great bass player named Drew Grass. He's played with everybody. You know, I probably first heard him on Ben Monder's records, and he's in the Claudia Quintet, and he lives like a few hours north of New York, but a New York guy, I guess. And when I was at the BAM Center one time, he said that he was like, when you're improvising or playing in any, you know, whatever you're doing, playing the head or comping or improvising, just picture that you're standing at the back of the room listening, and just sort of ask yourself, what does the music need right now? And I think at the time I sort of understood what he was getting at, which is like, listen to the full picture and get out of your own head and all that. But it probably wasn't until pretty recently, like the last few years, where I started to really like, you know, it's like if you're on there playing, it's like you never have to do anything. You just have to stand there or sit there and then listen. And then, you know, like things will just happen.
Yeah.
Without you even, but I mean, then the other side of that is, well, I've lifted all these solos and I've studied all this Bach, and I play a bunch of Eric Clapton stuff. And like, I've learned all this stuff. So it's not uninformed. Like I'm not totally sold on the idea that, oh, you don't ever need to practice or lift, and oh, if you learn a solo, you're just going to end up regurgitating lines. Like that's never been what it's been for me. It's always been like, oh, okay, so you could do that or this lick could go here. I'm going to go neither of those ways. But now that is like, that's sort of carrying something else because you've studied that. Some people want to do that. Like, I learned this cool lick and I'm going to play it all the time. That's great too. That's not sort of what I like doing, but, and some people do that really well. Like, I mean, even someone like Charlie Parker versus Bud Powell, in my opinion, Charlie Parker, I think somebody even wrote a thing where it's like everything he played, you can reduce down to 39 licks or whatever it is, a number, 51 licks. It's like a few dozen licks. And I mean, he's so clean. Like, don't take this as any kind of slight on him. He's still one of my absolute all-time favorites. But if you look at Bud Powell, he didn't play as clean as Charlie Parker, generally. Like, there's more mistakes and it's more humanistic. You know, Bird is like God, you know, it's like superhuman. But Bud Powell, he didn't really repeat himself very often. So I think there was more freedom there. And they're like this, if I were to say like, the spirit of true improvisation, whatever that means, bullshit, I would say, well, that was stronger in Bud. But as a complete performer, you know, I think it would have been a lot stronger in Bird. So I would say I'm more in that, like, I find it very hard to play things perfectly and polished. Like I'm a little more vulnerable and sensitive when I play. So it's sort of more in that, you know, I want to choose people to play with that I have no idea what the fuck is going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and I want the audience to feel that. I want to feel that. And then, you know, sometimes, man, there's people I'll get together and play with, Dave French or Michael Davidson. Sometimes we'll play the same song like 15 times all afternoon. And it's never the same, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
That's a good segue into my next kind of question. I'm curious to know your thoughts on the state of modern jazz now that it takes so much influence, and there's like a lot of bands. Like if you look at David Binney and what he's doing in LA right now, he plays with a lot of guys that aren't jazz trained, but they're just kind of, he likes the way that they improvise and the way that they conceptualize music and kind of play in between what he is trying to do. I'm wondering if like that's something that you're cool with, that there's more people that aren't as well versed playing the tradition,
right.
but getting into improvised stuff.
Yeah. I am not cool with it, and you need to contact David Binney because we're going to have some words. No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, first of all, you know, I don't personally even think it's useful for me, probably most people, to even define what the word jazz means.
Yeah.
Like, everyone seems to have their version of jazz, and then you can like, of what that word means. And then you find people who define it similarly to you, and you're like, finally, these people are not stupid. Finally, my people. All right. Yeah. High five.
Finally,
jazz exists from here to there. And yeah,
Let's
exactly.
go bowling.
But it's not, like if you look at the beginning of jazz, I think the first while, 10 or 15 years, there was no improvisation, like when the word was first used. So some people say, well, as long as there's improvisation, it's jazz. And it's like, okay, well, great if that works for you, but that can't be the definition. I don't think. So, and then there's kind of like, oh, is Duke Ellington jazz? Yeah. I mean, you probably have a hard time arguing no. But if you were like, well, is Weather Report jazz? I don't give a shit. I'm not going to answer that question. I don't care what it is. And there's obviously jazz elements. I mean, but people could even argue me on that. Like some people will say jazz has to have a swing beat. It has to be 4/4. And I wouldn't argue that either. It's great. Yeah. I mean, so much of it was. So I just sort of like, if somebody would ask me, what do you play? Modern jazz, I guess. And I'll always say, I don't know, instrumental, modern music, modern jazz. Like the fact that there's like, you know, a lead sheet and there's a melody and chord progression. And then typically with my music, you know, improvise over the form or a form and then intro, outro. Like there's enough. And, you know, sometimes there's a swing beat. There's enough there that I don't feel terrible about using the word, but you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to offend anybody by saying this, and I hope I wouldn't, but to me, it's almost like racism. Like, do you think Italian people and Jamaican people should mix? It's just like, what? Well, why not? What are you talking about? Like, if somebody wants to mix two styles of music, I mean, it's all about that.
Yeah.
Like that, and that's I think what jazz was. Jazz probably took this and that and this and that and mixed it all together. So like sometimes I'll have arguments with my students where they're like, I just want to sound like this person. This is the shit. That's it. And it's like, okay, so you like this person and this person's from the 50s and that's all you want to do. Like, but if that person, this hero of yours, had your mentality, right? In 1954, if your hero was doing what you did, listening to somebody from 60 years ago and being closed-minded and not being aware of what's in front of them socially and musically and everything, you wouldn't have that music of your hero.
Yeah.
So you think that by copying the notes, you're not doing it. You're not doing it. you're doing the superficial part.
Yeah.
You're not doing the big picture. You're not creating and respecting the old, but being bold, doing something new and not giving a fuck. So yeah, I mean, I think everybody's goal should just be to express something, communicate something, and by all means necessary, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, you know? So yeah, man, I mean, music, some of my I think all of my favorite music is probably right in between different things. You know, how would you define Cream? How would you define the Beatles at the time? You know,
I was like, Cream the band or like in your coffee?
The band.
Yeah.
I don't drink coffee, but yeah.
Yeah, what the fuck was I gonna say? Oh yeah, that's why I don't like in Punchu's bio, in our band's bio, it states jazz as some of our influences for composition, and I've argued with it with the band members, and I don't like having it in there. But
I wrote that.
I don't. Yeah, it's just a weird
All right,
word
fight.
for me.
Let's duke it out.
Well, the only reason I
I'll
put that in
settle this
there
right
is because
now.
we
Settle
both
this right
fucking
now.
play jazz music. We play traditional
You
jazz
guys are looking
music a
so
lot.
cuddly on your porch swing. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's open
There's
up
just
the
a
can
wall
of
of
worms
hate
here.
between us.
Yeah, I can see it.
He also made us. Jake also made us produce tapes, like cassette tapes. But that's the first batch of physical copies we have for a band are cassette tapes, not vinyl, not CDs. Cassette tapes.
Okay, look.
It's also
it's
something
part
I
of
was
the
against.
indie like hipster revival. It's the same as if we made vinyl. I mean, tapes are a little less common now, but I still think tapes and CDs go hand in hand. With I don't think people have a CD player as much as they don't have a tape player.
Anyways, I digress.
With the exception of people who have old cars. I think up until like 2013, I think cars still came with a CD player.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess cars are. Wow, that's great.
And,
yeah, my car is 2011.
And so it does, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other one is like, because I just made a record and went through this process where radio stations and promoters and whatever, they still deal with CDs. That's still the media. It's not vinyl. It's not cassette. It's not MP3. It's CDs. That's still what they're dealing with. I don't know if that'll end in 6 months or whatever, but
that's interesting.
Currently, you know,
yeah,
that's
I remember,
what they still want.
I remember when Jazz FM sold all of their records. They're like, we don't do this anymore.
I was there. I was lined up with Neil Swainson early in the morning and bought a bunch of them.
I know. I saw you there.
Oh, okay. I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was. I think. Well, that was when I was in high school. I think. I remember just like in the middle of the summer, just like, and this is like right when I was like really getting interested in this stuff. I was like only listening to like John Coltrane and Miles Davis. Like that was all I was listening to that summer, and I was like, oh, I gotta get these records. So I drove down to Toronto by myself, and I sat and I was like, hey, that's a guy that came to my school.
I think you missed out on that.
That's hilarious. Wow.
You probably could have picked up some really.
I had
crazy
no
records.
idea. I was just grabbing names that I
you
thought I
gave me
recognized.
a great record
I ended up
too.
picking up some dank stuff. Yeah, I got this like Jim Hall and Bobby Brookmeyer record.
Nice.
That's super dank. I
Totally.
got like
Didn't you give that to me?
No,
Or did you get two?
I definitely still have that one.
I have one that you gave to me.
I got
that
this
was
like
both of those guys.
Charlie Christian like Solo Flight.
Classic.
And like I can't believe I have that one. That one's really cool.
Yeah, a lot of Duke Ellington big band records.
Anyways, you got to take jazz out of our bio on the website.
But it says other. Okay, whatever. We're not gonna have
See,
this
because
conversation.
when I write my own music, and people ask what kind of music that I write, I feel weird saying it's jazz music, because I'm writing stuff that's like also heavily influenced by like all the progressive rock music I listen to. Well, not that heavily. I don't know. I'm just like messing around with time signatures and forms and stuff like that. And
yeah,
and also like
it doesn't matter who cares? Like what's the point in defining it?
Yeah.
Just play it for somebody and they're either gonna feel it or not.
Yeah. I still don't like it in our bio.
Okay.
Anyways.
You guys are going to have to figure this out.
Yeah, we're going to have to wrestle on your front lawn.
This is something you're going to need to work out one way or the other.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Can we talk about Sonnet 18 a little bit?
Sure.
I'm kind of curious about, can you just like walk us through, like, I know it was a lot of work, but briefly walk us through the steps of how you came about deciding to record this album, how you decided on the songs that went on it and the personnel too? Because I know I'm really curious about that, because I'm now thinking about who I might want to record with shortly. You know, I have to do that in my 4th year at Humber, so I'm wondering about how to pick my band and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. So, let me think back a little bit. So I was in New York hanging out, and I was going to be in New York, and I thought, well, why don't I record a demo with some of the people that I like with and play with down there? And basically, I've always had a couple bands on the go. So I sort of had a group in Toronto, which at the time was called Obsolete Vernacular, which consisted of Mingja and Dan Fortan and Michael Davidson. And we were sort of playing the compositions I wrote that were kind of like chamber, modern jazzy, classically folk music stuff. And but some of the songs, you know, lent themselves to a quartet too. And anyway, so I've been playing with Adam for years and years and years, drummer, and Adam Maruda. And I don't know if that was the first time I'd played with Rick, but it might have been. But I knew Rick Rosado, great bass player. He was good friends with my friend, is good friends with my friend Fabio. He's good friends with Adam. They've worked a bunch together. I've seen him a bunch with Ari Honig's band and with my friend Alex Goodman, fantastic guitar player. So I really liked his playing. And it was probably Adam's recommendations. It's like, oh man, ask Rick to do it. He'd probably do it. I'm like, okay. So Rick, and anyway, I wanted to record a demo. So I sort of wrote a few songs specifically to record a demo down there. And Seamus Blake, fantastic tenor sax player. I mean, I first heard him when I was in 1st or 2nd year at Humber, and it blew my mind. I've been the biggest fan ever since. And we played in a band together called the Bop Tarts, which we have done a handful of gigs over the years with that, not for probably 5 years or more now. And he was also married to a good friend of mine, Vicky, who's an amazing piano player and arranger, Vicky Yang. And so I sort of knew him that too socially. Like I'd see him when I went down to New York and hung out with Vicky. And so, I mean, he was, you know, literally, I mean, if I guess if I were to say my favorite living saxophonists, or, you know, especially that would lend themselves to my music, it would be him or Joe Lovano, you know, and, whatever. I mean, I didn't try to get Joe. I probably wouldn't have been able to afford him anyway, but I mean, Seamus, it was just there. And you know, I'd already talked to him before about like, would you ever do a record? Oh yeah, sure. Well, you know, why not? So it just sort of happened like that. We made the demo with them. I wrote the songs. The demo was recorded in like 2 hours in a studio called Systems 2 in Brooklyn, which is now not there anymore. Anyway, so I got that demo, brought it back up, and eventually got Toronto Arts Council grant. And then at that point, it's like, okay, this is happening. So, you know, I booked a recording date that everyone could work with. And then I started to, you know, write more music, pick from my old songs and see what could work and what couldn't. And just sort of pick, in that situation, it's almost a matter of like, well, if I was writing a song and Seamus Blake was playing the melody with me and Rick Rosado and Adam were in the rhythm section, how would I want it to sound? Like this, you know, like, so a lot of it was just kind of like that, like what would really sound great and sort of capture the vibe. So that's sort of how it happened.
That's cool. I dig the writing for the band members thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's a neat thing. I haven't done that a whole lot. I wrote this one song with Jake in mind, but we've actually never ended up playing it the way that I meant it to be played. So I wrote the song called Quake, and I wrote it to have the bass play the melody.
Yeah.
But we've never played it where the bass played the melody. It's all because the first time I ended up playing it, we did it with quartet. So the saxophone player ended up playing it, and that's just been the way I've done it every time.
Was it because I gave you a hard time about the high F sharp or whatever?
No, it's a high Da-da-da, it's a high E.
Oh, that's not so bad.
Yeah.
I'll play it.
Yeah, apparently, what do you call it? Thumb position?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to go past D or
Well,
something?
you can. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't
But your
sound like
tuning
it.
sucks.
Look, Steve Wallace said, don't go above the E.
Man, you guys have got some shit to work out.
We definitely do, yeah.
Yeah, maybe you should stick around after we finish this so we can talk.
I'm leaving.
But yeah, that's the only time I've ever done that.
We write rock music with that in mind, I think.
I don't, but even with that, I feel like I'm shooting in the dark. I'm shooting in the dark. Our band is so weird that there's a lot of stuff happening. So I'm just kind of like, the music that's like heavy and weird and kind of experimental gets thrown into the Punchu barrel.
Yeah.
And then I hope for the best. That's all it's ever been. And it's sort of
Cool.
worked out this far. And there's been songs I've written for Punchu that, and because I don't write with you guys in mind when I write for Punchu, and you know, there have been songs that just haven't worked out.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Anyways, before I want to make this the last question.
Okay.
But I want to ask you about these two stories that involved a bass player that you told me once. I want to ask if you can tell them.
Uh-oh.
I don't know how we got on this topic once, but we were just talking about bass players, and you told me about that one time when Neil Swainson's. No, it wasn't Neil Swainson. Who was it? Someone's bass got stolen.
Jim Vivian.
Jim Vivian. Yeah.
Sure. So this is how I know the story, how I was told the story. And so Jim Vivian had a bass stolen, and I think it was stolen from, I think he had a bass stolen twice. And one of them was like from off the bandstand, and one of them was, they broke into his car in a parking garage. You'd have to ask him. But the story is, and I think it's legit, is there was an off-duty police officer driving around downtown and listening to the radio and listening to Jazz FM, and the DJ said something like, oh, and by the way, if you happen to see a upright bass kicking around, Jim Vivian had his bass stolen last night, and blah, blah, blah. And as he's hearing this, he sees a homeless guy dragging a bass by the headstock, walking down the street out of the case. And he approaches him and is like, hey man, I'll give you $50 for that bass. And he's like, sure. And that's how Jim got his bass back. That's the story as I know it.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
Oh man.
$50, what a deal. Oh man.
What about, this is the other one that killed me. If you're comfortable talking about it, you told me about this one time you played a duo gig with a bass player and he like left it outside or something. Like you guys were partying at his place.
Yeah, no, so that was, it wasn't a duo gig. So that was the first jazz gig, like real jazz gig I ever did. I was in first year at Humber, and it was my friend Paul Van Dyke, who's a great bass player. He was from Kitchener. We went to Humber together, and I think he lives in Montreal still now. And so he asked me, hey, I got this, I think it was a quartet with this singer. Can't remember his name. He ended up being a bit of a DK. I think that was his name, like Deekay or something. And so it was like a quartet with vocalists, bass, and the drummer. And we played in this place in Burlington on the water that was just like, I just remember walking up like 17 things of stairs and getting to this cool little jazz bar. And you know, I was just like trying to play jazz in first year and everyone was clapping. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to have to gig every night and do this. And, but yeah, we ended up hanging on the water all night. We got home really late, like 5 a.m. or something. And, went to sleep in his house, in his apartment, Lake Promenade, down from George the Greek there. And, we woke up in the morning and Paul, you know, it's like trying to make it to class after 4 hours sleep. And Paul's just like, where's my bass, man? And his apartment was really small. It's like, you know, so it's like, well, it's not there. Like, oh man, it's like, well, we brought it home, right? And then we had sort of figured out that we took it out of the van and then walked upstairs to his apartment with all our stuff, but not with the bass. And he just left the bass there on the sidewalk. So we get outside. Not only is the bass not there, but he's getting, at the time, a parking ticket written up. So that's that. So we go back inside, and I'm like, what are you going to do? And he's like, I think I just have to drop out of school. Like, I can't afford another bass. Like, this is really fucked. Like, I fucked up really bad here. And not that long later, within a day or two, he was in his apartment building in the elevator, and he saw a sign. It said, "Found, very large instrument. Come to room 512 or whatever." And so he went there, and there's this little old lady that found the bass on her morning walk and brought it up there, and he got it back.
I think the ultimate end of that story is if he went to that apartment and she just had a tuba, and he was like, "Where the fuck?
God damn it!
Yeah,
What are the odds?"
Yeah.
Jeez.
And he's like, "Well, I'll take it. I got to go to school for something."
All right, yeah, I gotta supply the low end.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, honestly,
gotta do
maybe
it.
I can play bass lines on this.
The jazz tuba.
Crazy.
So I guess the last question is.
Yeah, like that Bill Frisell record, The Rambler, man.
Oh yeah.
Tuba.
Ooh, I haven't listened to that.
It's
But
a
there's
great
tuba on
record.
it?
Oh, there's tuba on it.
Ooh.
That's awesome. So the last question is, it's kind of how we wrap up all these. Do you have any plans post COVID? I know that you said that you don't really see there being shows for the next little while, but just kind of wondering like what you have planned coming up to do, and if you're preparing to come back and play gigs again or anything like that.
Wait, hold on. Can I make this a two-parter?
Yes.
Okay, so make that the second part. I'm also make this the first part. I'm curious about what you've also been. Okay, so you got into this a little bit before, but like what have you been working on? Maybe like what have you been practicing? Because I know you practice a lot. So like what's been like? You sit down to play guitar. What have you been doing these past like? I guess it's been 6 months.
Yeah.
So just generally.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably almost answer the other part first in that I'm just not thinking about the future because I have no idea, and I don't even think there's a point guessing, because people that know way more about epidemiology and vaccines and all, they don't have a fucking clue. So I don't really, I'm just not interested in guessing. So I'm not thinking about the future at all. You know, I'm happy to be in the moment and do whatever I can now. As far as what I play, I mean, a big thing has been I'm trying to get this solo guitar, stride guitar thing together, which maybe we talked about that in our lessons. I've been working on it for a couple
I saw
years.
the Panonica video. I was gonna
exactly.
I was gonna message you, but I was gonna ask
Yeah.
if that was the stride guitar thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So I've been working on that. Like, I guess my goal is to be able to play every song I know, every ballad, and maybe even medium that you can do as a ballad like that. And so on a solo guitar gig doing that, or just for myself, like I just find it sounds really complete and it's a cool thing. So I've been working on that a lot. I've been working on my demos, recording at home, like I kind of mentioned. So I'll have a song and then I'll try to, I found a really good way to mic my acoustic and just sort of blending it to get it to sound really nice. And so I've been doing some of that stuff in the home studio. I always sort of just work on, like I'll just plug in my guitar and just kind of play. And by that, I mean, typically it'll either be single note improvisation. And like, so I'll just dial in a nice sound and I'll just play, you know, if I want to be smarter about it, I'll also put on a metronome and just work on some of the tempos that I suck at, which at the beginning of COVID, that's what it was. I was just like 2 to 4 hours a day, all the shitty tempos. I have these lists of tempos that I'm not so good at. And so instead of like, man, I sounded so great there and I sounded so shit there, why? You know, and I was doing that for 10 years. I'm like, oh, because every time you get called in between these tempos, you suck because you can't play them. It was nice to get that info. So I'm working on that. And then a lot of Bach, you know, I've been working on a lot of Bach chorales and inventions, and I try to get them to the point where I can play them perfectly, like where it sounds like a performance and it sounds like, you know, I'm just like a god improvising this, which is, I think, how Bach wrote them, you know, where I could just play it and every phrase is delivered properly and I feel comfortable. And so that's probably like the majority of it is in those categories currently.
Yeah.
Cool. What have you been practicing?
Me? Folk. Writing folk finger picking.
Nice.
On guitar. I haven't been playing that much bass, but yeah.
at the beginning of
Who have you been like? What have you checked out? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no. So say what you're gonna say.
Oh, like, do you know that song, "Girl from the North Country" by Bob Dylan?
No, I don't.
Check that out.
Yeah.
What about Nick Drake? Do you listen to Nick Drake?
I don't. No, I'm just sort of starting to get into it now. Like
Check
the
him
past
out.
couple of years, I've been more into folk music, but it's not been like I haven't checked out any of the classics or anything. I'm just really just trying to get because I've always like done this thing where like I sweep the one like the middle finger and I don't use the first finger, so I'm just kind of like trying to get that down. I know it's not something that maybe I should be where I should probably be playing more bass, but yeah.
Check out they're sort of medium difficulty, but try playing Julia and Dear Prudence by the Beatles. Those are two good. They're not super fast, but it's they're really cool patterns that check those out. I found I've got a lot of mileage out of just sitting, even just play, if you could just get the pattern and just play one chord for like an hour and just kind of get zen about it, then you get to the point where you don't have to think about your right hand at all. And that's great though. I love that shit.
Awesome. I'm glad. Do you want to, oh, sorry.
I guess I'll take my turn.
Okay. Sorry.
At the beginning of the pandemic, I dove hard into open triads. But specifically, I can play open triads, but specifically broken open triads. So for like weeks, I was just going, just every inversion like up, like do 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 do. So up from as low as I could, all the way up and back down 3 every key, and then I would go backwards. So like top highest note to lowest note, and go. I did that for a long time, so I got really good at open triads, and then I got into this band called Pine Grove. Have you heard of them? They're like very indie folk country.
Yeah.
Like country and folk influenced indie rock. But just it very like in harmony. And so I've been obsessed with that. So I'm like, I can't get out of playing just like chord substitutions are just ruined for me at this point because I just play so much just like open G position stuff. I'm like obsessed with that now, and like
I love that.
And
I'm all about the capo lately. Totally big time capo.
Yeah, I've been getting capo these days. It's just like because I want to play in that like open G position or D or E, right? And it's like I don't want to always play an E or G. So
yeah.
Anyways. That's my. I just thought.
No, that's the shit. Even for like a lot of the classical pieces I'm playing, I'll do that. I'll put the cap on the first fret, second fret, third fret, up to the fifth or even sixth or seventh, and just find where it's sort of where the melody resonates the best, like on whatever instrument I'm playing, and that's a lot of fun too.
Yeah, that's great. Well,
check out before I go. Check out the Julian Lage. You know Julian Lage.
Yep.
He has a bunch of etudes, but I think it's the first one. I think it's guitar etude number 1. It's like the hardest open triad technical exercise I've ever learned. And I learned it and I never got to speed, but check. Oh, can't hear you. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. You look really silly right now.
Can you hear us now?
Oh, there you are.
The interface became unhooked for
we'll cut
a
that
second.
Out. Sorry, what was it that you were saying?
We completely.
Yeah, we missed that whole
You
section.
said I heard etude number 1, and then that was it. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So Julian Lage, guitar etude number 1.
Yeah.
He has a bunch of etudes, and the first one is like really hard and fast, and it's open triads, broken open triads, and it's like just the left hand too is pretty challenging, but the right hand is like. And so I could never get it up to speed or anything, but I was working on it like 3 summers ago. But like just and checking his right hand out and how relaxed he is when he plays it, like definitely worth checking out if you're into broken open triads.
Yeah, cool. Yeah,
Incredible.
I haven't dove into Julian Lage a whole lot, but I'm super interested in his style. Like, you know, those live videos he made when he released what was it called, Arclight, with
Sure.
um
Scott Colley.
Scott Colley. Yeah. That intro to I'll Be Seeing You is just
Oh, right. Yeah.
freaking nuts, and he's improvised. At least I assume he's improvising.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Oh, he's a complete freak genius. Yeah, he's incredible. Totally. Yeah.
Here's this video about just talking about using the range of the guitar to your advantage and not feeling like you have to stay in one spot or be constantly moving, which I feel like is a big problem with guitar players. And he's like, just like solo in this range and then add one note.
Oh, yeah.
And use it, and he's just do that. And I picked up my guitar and I tried it, and I'm like, how the fuck you just make it sound like that?
Well, I was there's this great singer in Canada, Sophie Millman, and I was doing a bunch of gigs with her like years ago. I don't know, 8 years ago or something. I don't know how long ago. And she was like, hey, play a little intro for this song. I was like, oh, okay. Well, what's the vibe? Well, it's just kind of like, I'm like, okay, you know, just trying to pull something out of my ass on this song I'd never really heard before. And like that. She's like, yeah, just make it more like whimsical. And like, she's like saying all these words. I'm like, holy fuck. Okay. You know, I'm like trying all this stuff. And then finally she's like, here, let me play you the record. So I listened to it. And I'm like, holy fuck. This is incredible. I'm like, who is this? She's like, Julian Lage. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll try my best.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Be more like Julian.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh my goodness. We're gonna wrap it up there. That's about the time. Thanks so much for letting us pick your brain, dude. We really appreciate this. Man, we didn't even talk about Smashing Pumpkins.
We'll save it for another time.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Well, thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Our pleasure. We're gonna put Trevor's links to Trevor's socials in the comment section, and his website and all that stuff. Buy his latest album, Sonnet 18. Don't just stream it because Spotify, fuck you these days. Have you seen that the stuff that the CEO said?
No.
He's
What?
like, and you know what? I won't get into it now. Go check it out. He's saying some nuts stuff. So
Being a little greedy.
Yeah, he's being a little bit greedy. Anyways, yeah. So go buy Sonnet 18.
Out of character for a CEO for a big corporation.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Who knew?
Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I thought the music industry was good.
Yeah.
You can help support Punchu, and we'll name it on the pod by subscribing to this channel and liking us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Bandcamp. Yeah, buy our music on Bandcamp. And yeah, we'll have some. We're working on some more merch right now, so
yeah,
check that out. Other than that, Trevor Giancola. This is we'll name it on the pod. Happy Beef Wednesday. Thanks for watching.